Let us once again congratulate you with this very important, especially against this current backdrop, forum. And currently we have a concurrent session. And during this session, we will be talking about the contemporary opportunities and challenges when it comes to immunizations. Today, a lot has already been said about the fact that the previous year was quite a challenge for everybody, including the immunization programs. There were some challenges indeed in the implementation of that program. For some time, the program was halted. It had to be halted, but in general, judging by the results of the previous year, we can say that we made every effort and we caught up, and by the beginning of 2021, we've gained some quite good results across almost all the manageable infections. We see some good results when it comes to target coverage, and this medium range is about 95% of children in the targeted groups. Across almost all the infections, excluding pneumococcal infection. And during the previous collegial meeting, we've already discussed it. We do see that we have some challenges and problems to face, meaning they concern some immunization programs of the adult people. The major losses we suffered, especially among the immunization of adults. We slowed down the dynamics of the diphtheria immunization. We do have some problems when it comes to polio prevention and immunizations. Especially this is about some specific regions in the Russian Federation. And I believe that other countries have faced the same kinds of situations. And today, we are to discuss these problems. We did experience some positive developments as well. The government of the Russian Federation adopted a strategy on the implementation of immunizations in Russia. The plan how to implement all it was approved, and this plan enshrines the challenges and the problems when it comes to immunizations. It sets up the tasks, and we, in accordance with this plan and the strategy, we plan to address all these issues. Such issues as the improvement of the national calendar of immunizations, the calendar of the epidemiological immunization, such issues as the safety of immunizations as one of the core tasks that we face. It is also about the development of the industrial potential, the development of an improvement of different vaccines production. And one of the core tasks that we face today is the herd immunity against the new or novel coronavirus infection. And before we start our deliberations, I'd like to give the floor to the Coordinator, Program Manager of Vaccine-preventable Diseases and Immunization Division of Health Emergencies and Communicable Diseases, Siddharta Datta. And we would like to thank our colleagues from the European Office of WHO, as well as the colleagues from the global departments of WHO, for every effort you've made. You did indeed a lot to set up the priorities when it comes to the implementation of immunizations, especially against the backdrop of the pandemic. Our colleagues from WHO have been monitoring very carefully all the efforts of Russia that it has made in terms of immunization. Not only this is about the calendar of just regular vaccination, but also the vaccination against the COVID-19. So the first speaker of this particular session is the Program Manager, Vaccine-preventable Diseases and Immunization Division of the Health Emergencies and Communicable Diseases, Siddharta Datta. So the floor is yours, please.
Really appreciate that, and good morning from greetings from Copenhagen. Really like to thank the conference organizer for allowing WHO Europe to be part of this discussion today. Let me just share my screen with you all. Thank you. And as we start this discussion, I just wanted to highlight a few of the immunization characteristics in the WHO European region, the challenges, and mostly, actually, I think we should talk about the opportunities, like Madam Chair, you have already outlined. Also like to acknowledge the leadership of Russian Federation, the government, the ministries of health in putting forward the immunization agenda in the WHO European region. We need to start acknowledging what had been the impact of vaccination on the health of the world's people until today. We really want to acknowledge that the vaccine had been promoting health. Mostly it allows as one of the biggest public health program in the world, which has got such an expansive reach. The impact this vaccine has done in the life of the people, the economies of the world, is very much seen and known. We also have seen that this has saved lives and the cost to the health system. I think we can immediately see the impact of the vaccination program. This region has remained polio-free since 2002, and immunization and vaccination programs have played a tremendous role in this regard. We have seen the role that vaccine has played in ensuring that the children of today don't suffer from the vaccine-preventable diseases, the killer ones like the diphtherias, like the pertussis. And we just cannot forget the role of this vaccination in preventing pneumococcal pneumonias and others. So I think we need to celebrate, we need to accolade the efforts made by each and every healthcare professional in our region to ensure that the benefits of this vaccine reaches to the people's arm. When we talk about an universal reach of the immunization program, we know that these are the components around it. Just by having the vaccine alone in the country will not ensure that the benefits reaches everyone. It's extremely important that all these elements, the supply cold chain, the organization and planning, supervision of the program so that the potent vaccines reaches to the people, ensuring there is a monitoring and evaluation system, the financial sustainability of through the domestic funding resources. There is a system to communicate these effects of the vaccine, the benefits of the vaccines to the people, and also ensuring there is a robust training and capacity building activities in the country. We should assume that all these elements are sort of running a well-functioning apparatus. Each of these elements need to run in tandem in a coherent manner so that the impact of the immunization program is seen. If we look into the vaccination coverage of the WHO European region, and I'm taking here the measles first dose as an indicator, the WHO European region, the countries have made so important effort, and you can see the top line of the vaccination coverage. It shows that over years, the vaccination coverage has been around 93–94% coverage. It also shows that the population in the WHO European region are willing to receive this vaccine, but also the efforts made by the government can be extremely importantly visible. But while we talk about a very high immunization coverage, We also see a different pattern in the disease reporting in the WHO European region. As you see in the last 10 years, this is before the COVID times, the number of cases of measles reported in the region has also increased. So the coverage is also increasing over years, which has led from 93% in 2010 to 96% in 2019. The number of cases have also increased. So I think this indicates that we need to just look into within the national territories, within the subnational areas, to see where we can ensure that the vaccination coverage is equitable and also reaches to every community. One of the important things that the measles cases in the recent years have told us that the fragility in the success, we have succeeded pretty much, but the success is also fragile if we don't keep our guards on. As you see here, the cases of measles reported in 2018 and 2019, there was a huge outbreak in almost all countries in our region. This provides an opportunity for us to look at the subnational areas moving forward and finding out the drivers and barriers of the vaccination. So that is where the routine immunization program was built around. Let us try to see what are the reasons behind these inequities, which is actually more important than just looking into the numbers. We have seen that the middle-income countries of our region are lagging behind in providing the benefits of the vaccine to its population. If you look into the number of vaccines, the newer vaccines introduced in our middle-income countries vis-a-vis the higher-income countries, there is a disparity which is extremely visible. We have also seen vaccine stockouts in different regions, different countries in our region, and that in itself provides a barrier to providing access to the vaccination program. The vaccine hesitancy and decreasing demand in some of the vaccines in particular has led to this lower vaccination coverage or underserved areas in our different subnational areas, leading up to these pockets of vulnerable people and an outbreak that we have seen in 2018, 2019 for measles. I think COVID-19 provides us an opportunity. We should see the investments that will be needed to be done by all the member states in our region, and the amount of investment they are doing should be seen as a cornerstone, as a platform for improving the routine immunization of tomorrow. When we start talking about the COVID-19 vaccination and deployment, we need to find out what are the mechanisms that we have now in order to build upon that for the routine immunization of tomorrow. The WHO European region, along with the different partners and the European Technical Group of Experts, outlined late last year the impetus areas which need to be strengthened by each and every country to ensure that the robustness in preparedness of the countries. I think the vaccination program is as good as its preparedness level. And we just wanted to highlight here as well, given that newer vaccines, COVID-19 vaccines are made available, we also need to be flexible in our national immunization strategy for COVID-19, that all these parameters need to be reviewed regularly by the Ministries of Health and by the National Immunization Technical Advisory Groups, so that the agility in ensuring the service delivery happens in the country. What we also need to do is to monitor the reported preparedness status. As you see in the slide, the efforts made by the 53 member states of our WHO European region in ensuring that all these different impetus areas are targeted, they are reviewed, and then a progress made by the countries. As you would see, this is not an uniform picture. Some of the areas, they are far ahead. Some of the areas, they are catching up, which is normal in these circumstances. When we are learning more about a vaccine every day, we are learning how to deliver these vaccines to our communities. And if we start to look into the status of COVID-19 deployment and vaccination in our region, we have seen all 54 member states and territories have started the COVID-19 vaccination. It's quite a remarkable thing to see that everybody, every government, every ministries of health are ensuring that these vaccines reach to the community. As of date, as we see, more than 188 million doses of COVID-19 vaccinations have been administered in the region, with around 14% of the total population of our region at least have got 1 doses. But I think we should not just remain at the regional level to see what has been the status of vaccination. If we go down a bit into the countries by income level, it is extremely visible to all of us that the inequity in COVID-19 vaccine deployment is evident. The high-income countries are far ahead than the lower and lower middle-income countries in terms of their uptake. It's an opportune moment for all of us to come together to see that this inequity in vaccination uptake needs to be addressed, and trying to again find out what has been the drivers and barriers, building upon what we have learned in our routine immunization program in the past. The future looks bright for all of us. There are opportunities for us to build upon the COVID-19 lessons learned that we are learning every day on what needs to be done. The European Immunization Agenda, which is one of the flagships of the European program of work, provides us that opportunity. Building a better health tomorrow should be built on stronger immunization program of today. The 3 different principles that are outlined in the European Immunization Agenda 2030, which is now being developed with contributions and the leadership of the member states of the WHO European region, is to ensure equity in immunization. This is one of the principles which will now then need to be translated into action. The other platform is to ensure immunization across life course. The COVID-19 is allowing us that opportunity to ensure that the modalities of vaccine delivery are available so that countries can deliver the vaccine to all the age group. And obviously the last and the not least one, but most important one, that we cannot have one size fits all. The local solutions in each and every country, in each and every community, would need a local solution. And that is where zeroing down to the community level is extremely important. All of these elements are an integral part of the COVID-19 vaccine deployment. So when we talk about the immunization of tomorrow, as I said, this should be built up on the lessons learned on COVID-19. We know the impetus areas of the National Vaccine Deployment Plan, the 10 strategic areas which each and every member state has invested onto. These lessons should not be just in the paper, and they are translating into concrete actions in the country. These all need to be then intertwined with the principles of the European Immunization Agenda that I have mentioned. But the most important, another element about the COVID-19 global response efforts had been the access to COVID-19 tools, accelerator. The investment being done in the research and development should not go into waste with COVID-19. This should be the platform for us to move into routine immunization, better delivery, better research coming forward. The efforts made by the global community on manufacturing and developing a new vaccine should also be a cornerstone for us to move forward into the routine immunization. The deployment, the service delivery modality in the countries should also be a lessons learned how to strengthen the information system, the health vaccine safety monitoring, the vaccination data and information management. These are some of the critical elements that we are being seen as the priority areas for National COVID-19 Vaccine Deployment Plan. So just wanted to highlight that these all elements, the access to COVID-19 tool accelerator, the impetus areas of the National Vaccine Deployment Plan, and principles of immunization agenda are all seen as one capsule and not a separate entity. So we just wanted to share you some of the resources that, that you may go and look to, but also we'd like to really thank again for inviting us to share some of the elements with you. I pass it back to you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Datta, because for the next time you are representing the main guiding principles for the European region countries in realization of national immunization programs, and I really hope that everything that we are doing is really in line and well aligned with those principles. And generally speaking, I want to thank the WHO, the European Regional Bureau at the WHO, for your kind support that is rendered in our work in realization of the immunization program. Thank you very much again. And the next speaker will be Namazova-Baranova, Leyla Simurovna, who is the Academy affiliated Russian Academy of Sciences, head of the Executive Committee of the Union of Pediatricians of Russia. She is now in the remote mode joining us, and Leyla, I hope you could make it through the online. Yes, hello, greetings, distinguished colleagues. I hope you can hear me right now. Yes, we can hear you. Greetings. Greetings. Distinguished colleagues, at first I wanted to thank Albina.A and the head of the Rospotrebnadzor, Russian Federal Service for Surveillance and Consumer Rights. In my short presentation, I want to speak about some lessons learned about the existence of today's and about our future. We live in a very interesting time. It's a great time to live. But I, as a pediatrician, am a bit sad because of the fact that the population represented by children is decreasing. The population of children is decreasing. There are less children right now. This process is well aligned with the fact that there are more and more people living longer than 60 years of age. We see that the percentage of this category of people is ever growing, but unfortunately there are less and less children living on the planet Earth. And of course, this is putting us in a framework in which we need to pay special attention to the healthcare services rendered to children. In our country, there are 22% of population, so children. By the way, in the USA, in the China, there are pretty the same numbers of population representing children, 22%. We are living in the age of paradigm of programming of health. And these are this 1,000 days program, 9 months of in uterus life and 2 additional years of postpartum. But is this window of programming a bit narrow? I would state it like this, because we are opening this 6 months before the inception, or 12 months, or even 24 months before inception. Therefore, intake of folic acid 6 months before planned pregnancy is helping to prevent the central nervous system diseases in children, compared to the status when we start intake of folic acid from the first days after inception. It is the window that is brightly opened until the end of the childhood period, which is ending not at the age of 18, but at the age of 21, 22 years, because children are still growing after the age of 18. I think that the picture of malignant tumors is showing pretty much the same picture here. If the first class of the diseases is programmed in uterus, it was programmed within the mother's body, the morbidity rate is not high at the very beginning of the age, and from the age of entering the school, we have the decrease of the affection of certain genes with increase of epigenetical factors that are resulting in severe chronic pathology. By the way, if we speak about in uterus development, we need to state that the child in uterus is also the next generation, because within the in uterus child we have a reproductive system organs of future children to be born. But if we want to prevent certain diseases, of course we have arrived at great success at the tertiary prevention, at the secondary prevention, when we are providing for prevention of a more acute manifestations of asthma in static dermatitis patients. But of course the primary prevention and vaccination is a genius way to provide for a primary prevention. And I wanted to speak about in utero state of health and healthy affairs of a child is defined by the genes of both parents, of the bad habits in parents, because as you know, bad habits in parents are really programming and defining the health of children. For example, the allergic cases are higher in children who are born in the smoking parents. And for example, this can be also the case in the secondary in the secondary generation, when, for example, asthma or some consequences of smoking are transcended further to the next generation. Ecology plays also a huge role. If a family lives not far from a chemical manufacturing plant, this can really affect the child. But Th2 type of immune response and pro-allergic response type is inherent to all children, which is supporting the child in uterus, in the mother's body. And at the same time, the Th1 type immunity is not developed, because if it will be very or too much active, it will result in the loss of a fetus. If at the point of postpartum this type of immune response will not be switched, this will be the case of severe allergic or autoimmune or oncological manifestations a bit later as years will go by. But what shall be done to make this switch happen? It is very important for a child to give to have a natural birth path through the birth path of the mother, and during the next 30 minutes the child should have a breastfeeding procedure, so it should be breastfed by the mother. This is the initiator of a switch. And vaccination during the first hours after postpartum is also a type of a normal regular immune response with a greatly developed Th1 type of immune response, and the child will stay healthier for longer. And vaccination together with the breast milk is supporting our children here. What are the lessons learned from the yesteryears? As we know, as Mr. Osler told, the humanity had every time three main foes: the flu, the absence of food, and military atrocities. And this is actually the history for us, because when we take a closer look at the history of Russia, Catherine the Great, together with her son Paul, had the first vaccination before the vaccination was broadly represented in the masses. And although at this time there was a special medal issued showing the necessity of these procedures, and Catherine the Great in Russia told that it is just a mistake for a French a French king to die because of smallpox. This was not the case for the Russian Empire, and until the end of 19th century and at the beginning of 20th century, colossal masses of children in traditional agrar lifestyle of Russia died because of infections. And from the very beginning of its story, the young Soviet Republic Soviet Union passed a set of decrees decrees on there was also one special decree on the smallpox and on obligatory vaccination against smallpox. And here we see that from the very beginning the Soviet Union was paying huge attention to the immunization, and the official immunization calendar started to work or to be implemented from 1953. And for this for the time being, about 60 years, you see that our calendar of immunization was changed once in 10 years. There were some new positions, and out of the old one, after we have managed to combat the smallpox in the 80s, we could outline it and cross it out of the list. And we see that there is a huge rise in the life expectancy, plus 25 or plus 30 years even. We see the decrease in many infections, and today many people just don't understand and don't know how high was the time and how high was the toll that was paid to the infectious diseases in our country, and the toll can be more if we will not work further on the prevention. So what about today? When we speak about today, unfortunately our immunization calendar is rather modest if it will compare it to the immunization calendars of the other countries. And when we speak about the routine immunization calendar of the WHO, we see that HIV, Haemophilus influenza type B, is made only for the risk. We don't have rotavirus, papillomavirus vaccination in our calendar, and we don't have the revaccination for school kids in certain cases. And speaking about hepatitis B, in the new edition of the immunization calendar, it will be fixed. Speaking about rotavirus, we are working on the basis of different regions, and we hope that we will solve it and resolve it as a part of the new national calendar for vaccination. And of course, there is also too much work to be done. There's so much work to be done. If we will speak about YLD, in children, take into account 18 most often reasons. As you see, the colors green, yellow, or greenish or yellowish. These parts are speaking about YLD, so infections-related YLD. And this, as you can see, during the last 1.5 years, unfortunately, pandemics can encompass the whole planet, Earth, and together with other effects of pandemics, we've seen the effect as the decrease of access to the routine vaccination that encompassed all the regions, also the European region. We need to state that from the very beginning of pandemics, our professional association published on all possible resources our position document related to the pandemics that we have to provide for the further implementation of planned immunizations. It was also a set of recommendations and methods for the doctors to work with the patients, young patients with COVID in the second edition. What do I want to state here? Yes, we arrived at good results in decrease of child mortality, and in Russia we have a lesser level of child mortality even compared to the USA. But of course the situation can be drastically changed if we will put on hold the planned program for immunization. And as you see, there are also not the best one scenarios and worst case scenarios that can be a real life, and it can be a real case when we will avoid vaccination. By the way, people were thinking in the recent years that we need to fight more with the diabetes epidemics, metabolic syndrome, increased BMI, and oncology. But the last pandemics has shown us really clearly that the new infections, outbreaks of all the vaccine-controlled infections because of the anti-vaccine resistance of the population, resistance features, COVIDs, later death due to COVID, due to thrombosis, due to pulmonary diseases, due to other diseases, have shown that we've missed something here, and we need to be more precise here in this work, because the concept of life lifelong immunization is not a part of our day-to-day life. And moreover, we have a huge problem because of the anti-vaccines movement within the population. And in the beginning of the pandemics, the medical officials and doctors are using official resources. The regular people are unfortunately using only social networks where there are some paid discrediting vaccinations, the ADs against vaccinations with the similar topics, with the similar texts are paid by someone who wants the population, especially or including the population of Russia, not to have the preventive possibilities and not to use the immunization tools. Therefore, the social networks started to show this content as the harmful. There is a long history of some situations related to the vaccinations. Yes, we have in Russia anti-vaccine prone people and groups of population. These are the results of a research in 2016, and you see that the Russia is not showing the best results here in the proneness of people to the vaccination, because people are not believing in the necessity of vaccines, especially in the necessity of vaccines for the children. Of course, we are not in the severe case as the France, but still we see a huge anti-vaccine movement right now. For a certain moment, we've seen that there was a betterment in the year 2018, but in the last summer, we've seen many people who are more prone against vaccines. And by the way, the last work of the group of the effective healthcare working group that was announced in the Russian news agency by the RUNEPA, they are stating pretty much the same. We've made a small research of about 2,000 children in different regions, and you see that the picture of immunization is very different. For example, against tuberculosis, against hepatitis and measles is taking a good position, but speaking about the flu, there are almost no people who've got the immunization against flu, according to the calendar, and also pneumococcal situation is the same. By the way, anonymous questionnaire is distributed by the doctor. In the doctors are not showing the readiness of the doctors to be prepared for the vaccine. So, of course,
Now we do understand that the main resources of our healthcare system are for those people who are not curable at all, just to prolong their life. But instead, we should invest more in the prevention. So we, pediatricians, will definitely recommend to do the vaccination. The parents and adults of any age should be prone to vaccination, and any information is always published in our social networks and also on our website of the Union of the Pediatrician of the Russian Federation. Thank you very much for your attention, and once again I'm very thankful for this invitation. Yes, thank you very much, Leyla Simurovna, for your wonderful, extensive and historical presentation. I hope that it's not the last time that you present to us, and it would be a great pleasure for us to listen to your opinion that is especially valuable for us. Dear colleagues, now we proceed to our next report by Irina Mikheeva, Professor, PhD in Medicine, the head of the Laboratory of Immunoprevention, Central Research Institute of Epidemiology of Rospotrebnadzor. Yes, thank you very much for giving me the floor, and thank you for inviting me to speak at this high-level conference, international one. Today, a lot has been already said by the representative of the Federal Council on the immunization, that it is the baseline to fight for the health of our people. And the previous speaker told us about the immune prevention when it comes to medical aspects, but I would like to talk more about the strategic priorities for the prevention up to 2035. In August, the Assembly adopted the decision that approved the new global program when it comes to the immunization to the period up to 2030. The main element is the immunization as one of the integral elements of a healthcare system as a whole. And here we can see a very tense connection between SDGs of the UN member countries and the immunization program. And the role of the immunization has been demonstrated when it comes to the achievement of 14 out of 17 SDGs. When it comes to the preventive vaccination, we need to implement some national strategies. In Russia, we've been doing vaccination and we had special program from 1998 until 2005. After that, the document was over and we had some other programs when it comes to healthcare. For example, we had a program on the prevention of socially significant diseases. We also had some strategies, etc. And the WHO program of vaccination up to 2035, especially against the backdrop of the current pandemic, accelerated the development of the immunization in Russia up to 2035. And we've developed and drafted the strategy, and it was approved by the government of the Russian Federation in September 2020. Its main goal, the main goal of the strategy, is to prevent, limit the distribution and the liquidation of infectious and other diseases that could be prevented through the sustainable prevention of infectious diseases with the provision of immunobiological medicines that are produced in Russia. And when it comes to the vaccine preventive measures, we see that the Russian strategy is quite concurrent with the international one. And the main principle in here, when it comes to the global and national strategy of the immunization, is the access to the vaccination of the population, as well as the devotion for the vaccination. And it can be provided by the awareness campaigns and the information delivered to the population. Of course, we should confirm, or we should respect the principle of equality. Here we also have the support for the scientific research, as well as the reliability and stability of provisions due to the development of manufacturing of high quality and efficient immunobiological medicines. The 6 priority elements of the immunization in Russia have been developed up to 2035. So the first element of this, it has already been mentioned, this is the redevelopment of a national preventive or immunization calendar. And here we should proceed from a science-based medicine. So we should enhance the number of diseases, then we should target the population groups that should be vaccinated. Also, we should introduce some changes to the calendar when it comes to the immunization of all children of different ages with the combined vaccines with an inactive polio component. We also should develop the full cycle production of vaccines on the territory of Russia in those volumes that are necessary for the immunization. And we also should provide financially the procurement of vaccines against the rotavirus, the smallpox, the human papillomavirus, and other different viruses. What we plan to do as well is to enhance the number of infectious diseases against which we should vaccinate proceeding from the epidemiological situation. And we should also identify the target groups for this. In respect of the strategy of WHO for the lifelong vaccination, we should also develop the programs of vaccination of separate groups of population to enhance their quality of life. These people are such groups as pregnant women, the people with chronic diseases, the old people, those who can serve in the military services, and some other different groups. And we can also vaccinate children with the multi-component vaccines, and we can also proceed with the vaccines with the maximum volume of serotypes. We can also combine we can replace the 3-valent vaccines against the flu with the 4-valent vaccines. And we can also draft the proposal on the revaccination against the pertussis of people or children of different age. We can also enhance the groups of people that should be vaccinated against the hepatitis A. We can draft the proposal on the vaccination against the pneumococcus infection, and we can enhance this against the backdrop of the immunization calendar. And we can also assess from the economical and social point of view, and if needed, we can enhance the calendar. The strategy also enshrines the profile study when it comes to the efficiency and safety of vaccines against the novel coronavirus infection. Such elements are included as post-registration clinical trials. Also, the study of post-functional immunity to develop the vaccination strategy and tactics, and to include the vaccination against coronavirus to the national calendar of national immunization, as well as to calendar proceeding from the epidemiological situation. And the second element of the strategy is about the improvement of government policy, as well as the system of state control and surveillance, as well as the regulatory framework when it comes to immunization. Meaning we should provide with the harmonization of the legislation in Russia when it comes to the circulation of medicines, and we should make it correspondent with all the acts of the Eurasian Economic Union. We should also be guided by the regulatory acts when it comes to different requests connected to immunization. We should also improve the statistical data and operations when it comes to the prevention. We should also produce an information system and databases on the preventive vaccination. And we should also monitor the immunostructure of different groups of people. We should also check against the herd immunity against the infections that can be prevented with the vaccination. We can also monitor the spread of the pathogens of infectious diseases and their serotypes to manage the tools of the specific prevention. We can also improve, or we should also improve, the legislation of Russia to create a bank and a unified register that will be used for the production of vaccines. And that's how we'll provide our manufacturers with the types of those that are relevant. We can also proceed with a full-time cycle of production of the national vaccines. We can improve the measures of support of the national production of the combined 5 or 6 component vaccines, as well as vaccines that are planned to be included into the national calendar, such as against the rotavirus, the German measles, pneumococcal infections, and HPV. And on the foundation of the Russian manufacturing side, so we should develop the standards that will be adopted by the WHO, and will develop the antigens and antibodies for the vaccines of the flu, the seasonal flu and influenza, and also we will do it for the preclinical trials or pre-manufacturing trials for the medications, taking into account the requirements of EU. And we also should create some databases of the immunoactive vaccination medicines, and we should also prevent outbreaks of infectious diseases that could be brought to the territory of the Russian Federation. We also will develop a comprehensive program on the appearance and development of the vaccines of the new generation for those viruses that do not have any vaccine against. And we should also check and measure the post-vaccinal immunity, depending, of course, on the age and the health of the people that should be vaccinated. We should also improve the personalized approach when it comes to the immunocompromised people. We will also develop the contemporary, based on genetic technologies, the universal methodological platform to develop the efficient and safe vaccines against the viruses of high variability. And the third element of the strategy, which is also a priority, is about the development of the Russian manufacturing sites that will produce the immunobiological medicines, proceeding from the full cycle production. And it will include the modernization of the production sites, taking into account the requirements of EU, improvement of the technologies of the production, proceeding from the current and contemporary biotechnologies, as well as the development of innovative technologies and the design of the vaccines. Also, on the baseline of the Russian scientific universities and institutes that could develop and scale up the vaccines that will be produced afterwards. And the fourth element of the strategy is about the improvement of technologies to provide for the safe immunization and systematic monitoring of side effects after the immunization. And the optimization is also included into that. We should, of course, equip everything with the cooling equipment to observe the temperature regime. Also, we will produce the national thermal indicators. We should also create the medical instruments to be safe, and we should introduce the safe ways of the disposal after the immunization. We will also improve the system of the pharmaceutical surveillance, taking into account the EU requirements, and we will also consider the creation of database that will include all the data on the pharmaceutical surveillance. It will also be presented in English. And we should also monitor what are the side effects and what are the causes of them after the immunization. We should also develop the network of state labs to provide for independent studies of the assessment of quality of the vaccines. We should improve the sustainability of the vaccines and resistance of the vaccines to the temperature. We should also inform our population. We should raise the level of our medical staff. We plan to develop a whole set of communicative events when it comes to the immunization. We will develop the set to improve and raise the social responsibility of parents in cases they do not want to vaccinate their children just for no reason. We should also develop the loyalty of our population towards the vaccination. We plan to create special interactive modules on the issues of immunization for different types of medical staff, and we want to provide them with the opportunities to study with the use of the portal of a lifelong medical and pharmaceutical education. And we also assessed the status of immunization in Russia. And in 2002, the Russian Federation got the certificate from WHO on the liquidation of polio. And since 2017, the Russian Federation has been recognized as the territory that is free from the endemic rubeole. And by the beginning of 2020, we managed to decrease the number of the hepatitis cases by 15 times, and diphtheria cases are registered at a quite low level. When it comes to rubeole and other diseases, we see that this trend is downward one, and all this was preserved in 2020. Within the immunization calendar, proceeding from the epidemiological situation, we vaccinate against 23 infectious diseases: syphilitis, plague, anthrax, the fever, the yellow fever, cholera, the typhus, and the A hepatitis, and others, of course. And the finance are coming from the regional budgets for this. And as compared to other countries, Russia vaccinates much more than other countries when it comes to the epidemiological situation. Over the last 5 years, the vaccination, because of the epidemiological situation vaccinated more than 20 million people, and it is quite a good result. As a result of this strategy's implementation, we hope to satisfy the demand from the population, taking into account the recommended coverage within our national calendar. We will also organize a full cycle manufacturing vaccine in Russia to provide for the vaccination within the framework of the national calendar. The decrease of mortality because of the infectious and other diseases is expected. We want to increase the loyalty to immunization, and we want to decrease the number of ungrounded refusals of the vaccination. And we also develop the target indicators when it comes to immunization, which are the diphtheria morbidity should be not less than 0.0 per 100,000 people. Smallpox should be 0.1 per 100,000 people, and the rubella should be not more than 1 per 100,000 people. And when it comes to smallpox and rubella, it should be all be not more than 25%. And when it comes to influenza, we want to have 60% of immunization against it. And the share of immunobiological medication that are included into the national calendar of prevention, proceeding from the epidemiological situation, that are produced on the full cycle Russian manufacturing for 2025, 2035, we plan to have a coverage of 100%. So it will mean that Russia will be absolutely independent from foreign provisions of vaccines. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, distinguished Irina Viktorovna. This report highlighted quite in a detailed manner the strategic document that was adopted last year on our strategy of immunization, and we are very thankful to you for this. Our next speaker is Areg Totolyan, the Doctor of Medical Sciences, Director, the St. Petersburg Research Institute of Epidemiology and Microbiology, named after Pasteur.
Thank you, Albina Andreevna, distinguished colleagues. In my report, I want to speak... Yes, thank you. In my report, I want to speak about immunocompromised people. Now I will share my presentation. Yes. Thank you, Irina Viktorovna. So my task is now coped by the Leyla Simurovna, by the previous speaker, and therefore I will skip the immunization calendar, and I want to go straight forward to the problem of immune compromised or immune deficient people. At first, this is the primary immune deficiency, and here, distinguished colleagues, I want to remind you just on the principal groups and homological defects. Now we have the modern contemporary classification, and I was afraid to show it on the slides because these are more 350 nosologies as of today. They are updated. And of course, there is also the set of clinical markers of immune insufficiency or immune compromised states, the primary immune deficiencies. And out of this slide, you may see that if the allergic, autoimmune, oncological manifestations at the first primary immune deficiencies are just the shares of percent, like 1.5 dozens, but infections are the case for all variants of primary immune deficiencies, which is very topical for us. The secondary immune deficiencies in the clinical manifestations, they are pretty much the same with the primary one, and further on everything is relating to the detailed laboratory work. But let us see that the clinical manifestations, they are also on one of the first places, like infectious manifestations of the secondary immune deficiencies. At the secondary immune deficiencies, what is very important for us to not to forget about? At first, and let me refer to the article of Azar and Ballas from 2007, I am speaking being oriented on the professional and non-professional listeners. If you will go to the laboratory and let the test of the assessment of immune status and then compare it to the norm values, please do not arrive at the final conclusion like, oh, I have immune deficiency and everything is bad for me, because the first wish that these patients have is just to buy a white blanket and try to go in the direction of the graveyard. But please do not be afraid of this. This is a mistake. I am now referring to the patients and to the laboratories, because not laboratory has a right to understand or to decipher the immunogram, because this is the way of work of clinical immunologists. But when we speak about secondary immune deficiencies, it is very important to remind you, and this is in red, that this is very rare, very often infections, very severe infections as an infectious sign, very long term of infections, very unknown complications and pathogens. The pathogens that are not typical for the normal immune system. At the immune deficiency, these abnormal pathogens are working harder. What are the mechanisms? I beg your pardon for overloading of this slide, and because we need to be efficient in our time to be within the agenda. But the essence of this slide is as follows. Almost all microorganisms, I'm speaking here about bacteria and viruses, they, in the process of evolutions, they have the mechanisms of how to avoid the immune system. Therefore, on one hand, they can avoid the immune system of a human being, and on the other hand, they've managed to create mechanisms for counteracting the immune system, and here they are severely affecting the immune system in this way. And more, the microorganisms, what are they doing with our immune system? We also learned how to cope with the microorganisms on the level of our immune system, and you can read it out on my slide, because our today's life, current life, and the life of our patient that are getting their biology therapy, the so-called biology therapy with the monoclonal antibodies. This is just a modern set of biotechnological products that are aimed in the first line on blocking on a certain cytokine or cutting out or switching off from the immune system of a certain group of cells. And this is also a serious effect on the immune system. And although the cytokine network as of now, cytokine mesh, includes several hundreds of different molecules, it turns to be that the cutting out of one molecule out of this mesh can lead and can result in serious immune deficiency states. And here, as you can see on this slide, this is seen in view or on the background of drugs without which we cannot imagine therapy of oncological diseases, autoimmune diseases, in a lesser way, but still topical therapy of allergic diseases. And here on this slide, you see the list of main drugs aimed against the factor of necrosis tumors. There are different variants of these drugs. Mechanism of their effect is of a similar type, but the drugs are not similar because they are having different efficiency, different rate of clinical efficiency. and their action or the effect of these drugs in the first line is related to the therapy of autoimmune diseases, exclusion of the necrosis, tumors factors, and as the practice has shown, when the drugs started to be widely used, we have seen that the exclusion of only one molecule is leading to the fact that the latent tuberculosis infection is shifting to an active phase. And why are these things happening? On this slide and on the two next slides, you will see this, that the immune suppressive drugs, they have the different aims and different goals on different stages of the development of immune response. They are acting on the step of differentiation and proliferation of T cells. They can be also active on the stage of transfer of the information about antigen from the antigen presenting cell to the T cell, and they can also be efficient and act and have as an aim, as it is stated on this slide, on the cooperation between T and B cells, lymphocytes, on their effect on plasmatic cells and the complement system. Therefore, we, as of today, have clear understanding that the use of these drugs is leading to the immune suppression, and there is also the violation of immune vigilance. As the result, we see the infection. It can be also oncological disease, autoimmune disease, allergies, and my words, I'm now using these words and speaking about this not to put harm or not to tell the patients to be afraid. Please do not be afraid. I'm speaking to the patients. I'm speaking to the clinicians, clinical colleagues who have no sufficient experience in using of these drugs. Without these drugs, it is impossible, but you have to use these drugs in a very careful way. And of course, we arrive at a question. So, okay, all these groups of immune-compromised patients, are they able to use the vaccine? This is just a hilarious, joyful picture that I took from my colleagues, immunologists, and this slide shows that as of today, there are no absolute counterindications to vaccination. There are no such people who should not get vaccines. When we previously stated that primary immune deficiency that you need to avoid vaccination, no, that is not the case. In the blue tile, you can see here that there are certain indications for certain categories of patients and related to the certain vaccines, of course. And here are certain examples. At first, for example, non-live vaccine, they are safe and they're obligatory at all variants of primary immune deficiencies. And this is just a thesis that I want you to take as the take-home message, and please regard this as an axiomatic statement, because as of today you don't have to provide any special proofs to this. Speaking about live vaccines, the majority of live vaccines are having counterindications. For example, we have the nosologies or groups of diseases in the case of which live vaccines are not to be prescribed or administered. But still, this is not a silver bullet here, because out of this rule there are certain exclusions, and you need to be aware of these exclusions. For example, here on this slide, I will not read it out for the purpose of me sticking to the agenda. But the last but not least nuance that I want to put an accent on, when we speak about immune-compromised patients, we need to remember about the other people who are working or living with them, like medical staff, relatives, neighbors, and so on. We can also speak about the stationary settings, and these people have to be vaccinated, obligatory, because the immunization for them is obligatory. For these people who are surrounding immune-compromised persons, we need to administer immunization vaccines, and in some situations, in some cases, it is unfortunately impossible, and it's a pity, really. Why it is very important? Because we were speaking today about anti-vaccine lobby that is playing its role, of course, but this anti-vaccine lobby is using this particular topic. Like, for example, we have a severe life, the circumstances are severe, there are no people with normal, regular immune system in the modern world, therefore there is this crooked logic that because the majority has some immunology problems or shifts, vaccination is should not be done. No, this is not the case. Of course, these shifts in immunological shifts, there are not negative shifts, or they are not leading to some severe losses in health, as I stated at the very beginning of my presentation. Firstly, and secondly, without protection, the majority of immune-compromised people are more susceptible to the infection. And I was deliberately not speaking about COVID-19 until this last slide, because what do we see? We are oversaturated with this topic. We are speaking too much about COVID, and if everybody will speak about COVID-19, at the end of the day, we will just forget about this problem, because this is a problem, and we don't need to forget about COVID. Therefore, the last slide is devoted to this fiery, burning topic. Why? Because, as population research states and shows, and I mean the population research made by the Federal Service of Surveillance and Consumer Rights Protection and Human Well-being in 26 regions of Russia. And in this program, we see participants from 8 research institutes at the Russian Federal Service for Surveillance and Consumer Rights, hygienic institutes. And this research particularly shows that immunization is taking place, is ongoing. In different regions, there are different results, different ways, and it could seem a paradoxical way, but in such huge cities as Moscow and St. Petersburg, the natural way of immunization is not so rapid as we could imagine previously, because this is a more versatile system than the systems in the regions with the plain distribution of population. Therefore, without active vaccination, without additional immunization by means of vaccine, of course, we will not be able to cope with the actual epidemics. And as of today, you know that we have registered 3 vaccines. There is a question, or it is out of question really for the next year that there will be new vaccines. I have no doubt in this, and the ones who are aware of the latest news know that there is a new line of mucosal vaccines, for example, including the other types of vaccines. It is also a subject of many discussions. We arrive at many questions, and one of the questions here that is also very important for the professional community is what vaccine to choose. What are the indications to prescribe or not to prescribe? Therefore, what are the counterindications also for a certain vaccine? As of now, as of today, all vaccines have the similar position, similar rights, and similar framework of use. And I am clearly stating this because I understand what I'm meaning right now, because there is a certain set of indications and counterindications for the vaccines. But in the right slide, part of the slide, there are the groups of diseases that we've already covered today in the today's presentation that are naturally bearing some problematic views from the medical society. What does it mean? The part of the society, community will state, you don't have to make immunization in this case. I would state that we need to work step by step. We need to run limited clinical tests for these risk groups, and step by step, again, we can use this experience for broader and broader cohorts. And if we speak as an example about primary immune deficiencies that we were speaking about today, even for this category of patients, if there is a sufficient compensation of replacement therapy by intravenous immune globulins and so on, for these patients, there could be a need, under control, of course, in a limited way for on the basis of primary centers for primary immune deficiencies. It is necessary to run this kind of research. And at the end of the day, what do we have to be prepared to in a year or in 2 or even in 3 years is this step-by-step shift to personalized medicine and to personalized set of vaccines or collection of vaccine that would be optimal for this particular person. Thank you. Thank you very much, Areg Artyumovich. And now the last presentation will be made by Artyom Basov, PhD in medicine, head of the Laboratory of Surveillance for Diphtheria and Pertussis at the Moscow Research Institute of Epidemiology and Microbiology, Russia. Gabrychevsky Institute. Artyom, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Thank you for inviting me to speak to this very important conference. Dear colleagues, the diphtheria and pertussis infections, despite the fact that we had a successful and massive and efficient vaccination, still are quite severe, and we still face some lethal cases. In Russia, the mass vaccination against the diphtheria and pertussis started in 1956, and it actually allowed us to decrease the morbidity by 20 times. And starting from 2002, the vaccination against these diseases raised to the level of 95% in the subsequent groups. Despite or against the backdrop of the vaccination, the diphtheria morbidity during these 10 years has been about 0.01 per 100,000 people. Currently, we register the cases only in 4 territories of the Russian Federation, and the infection is bad or born only in 7 territories of the Russian Federation. And currently, we use some specific methods to assess the quality of the efficiency of the vaccination. So, serial monitoring of the diphtheria is done in the 7 indicators groups by the special method, and on an annual basis, we get the data to our institute from all the territories of Russia, and the data indicates that the seronegative share is 10%. And this means that the epidemiological situation is quite a good one. But during certain years, among the people over 60 years old and older, this indicator has been higher. And we also see that people have lost the sight of this infection because we've almost forgotten about it. We know that the serial monitoring isn't done in all the age groups, and that's why we can't really assess all the aspects of the vaccination against all age groups. And at our institute, we also do the control research of the blood samples from the indicator groups from different territories of Russia. And we also conduct the quality assurance and assessment of seroquality in different regions. And all this allows us to understand what is the level of vaccination in Russia. So the pertussis infection in Russia is spread almost everywhere, and the morbidity is between 3.2 and 9.8 among 100,000 people. But the picture is quite far from homogeneous, and while the average indicator is about 5 against 100,000 people, we see that over the last years, the vaccination has been quite spread one. But unfortunately, this infection still leads to some deaths. primarily, this is about children that haven't been vaccinated during their first year of life. Last year, we had 2 death cases from pertussis. Those were the children under 1 year, and they were not vaccinated. In general, in Russia, we see that the most vaccinated children are from 4 to 7 years, and when it comes to the intensive indicators per 100,000 of this year, or of the people, we see that the morbidity among them is quite a large one, and that's how we indicate that this is epidemiologically significant. When it comes to the morbidity of pertussis, the most risk lies among those who haven't been vaccinated and children or babies under 1 year old. Also, school children are quite susceptible to pertussis. Our coverage is still a large one, but the post-vaccinal immunity is being lost over the time. And we see that the structure of the pertussis infected people and the proportion of vaccinated and non-vaccinated people, we now see all these indicators in 2010, in 2019, and in 2020. And we see that the picture is all the same, just across all these 3 years. In all the age groups of infected people, we saw some mild and severe stages of infections. The severe statuses registered among the children under 1 year old, and this is another confirmation that this is a risk group. And among the adult people, we see that there are more mild cases, so they do not suffer from the pertussis so much. And we also register some hidden or not visible forms. Among children under 1 year old, we see that the most of them were about 2 or 4 and 6 months. They were during the stage of vaccination, or maybe they were not vaccinated at all. So those children weren't that active socially, and we believe that this is very important. Today, we see that the contacts of children under 1 year old are quite narrow ones. Those are relatives, parents, and medical staff. And in Russia, the pertussis among children under 16 or over 16 years old are not registered at all, and almost at all. And perhaps the pertussis is taken for something else. As to the social strata, 32% of those infected by pertussis were those people who haven't worked, and those probably mothers that were on maternity leave, and about 32% were the office workers. Well, actually, the hidden forms of pertussis is one of the major problems. Some large outbreaks can be registered with the large children groups. Last year, in all the hotbeds of pertussis were among families, and so the contacts are always within the family. So social monitoring today is not that informative, because it is limited only by one age group from 3 to 4 years, and there's only one method of studying this infection. And when it comes to the immunoprevention analysis, we see that the share of seronegative share was about 50%. And well, when it comes to the age groups over 50 years that had some antibodies and immunity to the pertussis, shows us that most of these people have already got over pertussis. We also studied some data from medical staff from clinics, and 34% of people had some specific antibodies to the pathogen of pertussis, and about 50% of pertussis-prone people was registered among young employees, medical staff, as well as among those who were over 50 years old. The average age of those who studied was about 43 years old. So seropositive medical staff in age groups with more than 30 years of working experience with children suffered probably from pertussis. They didn't know about that, and it could be the source of infections, and they could have transmitted this infection to other people. And also, we studied IgA and IgG data, and we've seen that indeed some people suffered from pertussis without even knowing it. One of the patients that was studied for that was coughing during 14 days before the test itself, and he didn't ask for any help about it. So we can say that according to the current sanitary norms, the medical staff, as well as adults that are working in medical and children's hospitals, should be studied, those who have been in contact with pertussis. The vaccination of people is implemented in European region quite a lot. In our region, in Russia, before the coronavirus, we asked for the immunization of medical staff, staff of schools, social authorities, to decrease the number of infected cases among babies under 1 year old. In the strategy on the development of immunization up to 2035 that has already been mentioned today by Irina Viktorovna, we see that one of the main elements of immunization and implementation on the improvement of the calendar of regular immunization and epidemic-specific immunization, it all includes the plan for revaccination of children of 7 years old, 14 years old, and over 18 years old. We see that mostly babies under 1 year old suffer from that. And we believe that we should pay attention to this particular group. It's very important to be timely with prevention and vaccination and to observe the right periods in before the vaccination. And we will also use cellular vaccines for those children or babies under 1 year old. And the prevention and vaccination against pertussis, the respect for epidemiological rules and methods will help us to prevent pertussis among all the ages, especially among children and babies under 1 year old. That's it from my side. Thank you for your attention. Artem Alexandrovich, indeed, this is a very important and interesting topic. It's been discussed quite a lot. We discuss a lot the development of the immunization and prevention of immunization against and prevention of pertussis. I would also like to pay or to draw your attention to the immunization against diphtheria. Fortunately, we did some or made some step behind. During 90s, we did have an outbreak of diphtheria, and now we have to set up a task for ourselves not to roll back to those times. And we have to make our medical personnel to be very careful about this disease. And we need to proceed with the regular immunization of the whole population against the diphtheria. And to draw some kind of a conclusion of this session, distinguished speakers, I would like to once again thank you for your very interesting, extensive and valuable reports. I'm sure that they would be acting as some guidelines for our audience today. I'd like to focus our attention on something that our pediatricians, our managers, coordinators, immunologists, our practitioners, such as Artem Alexandrovich, mentioned, because all they represented some analytical data. So to sum up, first, we need to provide the access to the immunization of our population. And this is the guiding principle that is enshrined in the immunization development strategy of the Russian Federation, and I do hope that other countries do the same. Secondly, immunization should be a lifelong, from the very birth and to during the whole life. This is another guiding principle that is observed in the National Healthcare Program, and it is also enshrined in the documents developed by WHO. Another aspect that I would like to draw your attention to is that there is an ongoing fight against the anti-vaccinal sentiments or lobby. And today, one of our speakers already mentioned what are their tools, the tools of people who are against the vaccination and who are lobbying against the vaccination. And we need to proceed with the immunization of our population in such a way that we should convince our citizens that all children, all adults can be vaccinated. And we need to first, of course, define the status, the situation, and taking into account all these conditions, we can develop an individual plan of immunization for some particular and specific patients. Well, our strategic document that has been mentioned before is the main one. It outlines all the main positions of our work, such as the improvement of the national immunization program, enforcement of our production and the technology, as well as the provision of the safety of the immunization. Irina Viktorovna has said a lot about it. She was very clear about that, and I think that will be guided by this document in our future deliberations. If you don't have any questions, and actually we are quite short of time, and we can't really discuss some questions right now. If you still have any, please send them in the online mode. And now I'd like to finalize this session and invite everybody to come to our lunch that has just begun. And also, on behalf of everybody, thank you very much, dear Albina, for your good moderation of this particular session. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Good luck and see you.